any weird wedding trend that I hear about, I heard it on Wait, Don't Tell Me, the NPR News Quiz, because I am that kind of nerd. But to introduce myself, I am Katie Sauter. I am a wedding planner, and I like to go into drama and all the other kind of crazy fun stuff that happens because people are fascinating. If you are planning your wedding, I have a free wedding planning timeline linked in the description below. And if you have a crazy wedding story, I do have a place for you to submit your story for a chance for me to read that on this channel right here. Check it out. Say happy birthday to that like button because it is my birthday month, so we are celebrating that. Woo! And don't forget to snuggle up and love on that subscribe because it deserves it. But keep it PG for me as always, okay? Now let's get into this. This is the craziest thing I have heard in a little while. I found this news article from the New York Times. Subway wedding. Yes, you heard that right. Subway wedding. Not the chain, but the subways of New York. So let's get into it because when I think subways of New York, I definitely don't think romance. But basically, people are embracing kind of this gritty, chaotic mess of a wedding where they just are like, yep, this is our reception space, this is our ceremony space, it's a free venue, kind of. I mean, you gotta get tickets, right, for the subway, and then you just take it to the end of the line and start over, I guess. I'm not a New Yorker, don't sue me. I don't know exactly how the subways work. I've been in them. That's the extent of my knowledge on the subway system, and that I'm aware how gross the subway is. It's cool, but it's gross, okay? Don't sue me, it's gross. As a germaphobe. But like, you can see these photos from the New York Times of these couples that like look really happy, and there's people around them taking pictures, and who knows if they're guests or not. It could be a random person. But this first couple actually managed to get a 5-tier wedding cake onto the subway, and they just included their friends and their strangers. It's such a wild concept to me. Such a wild concept. So apparently this first couple was called Esme Valdez and Daniel Jean. And Daniel Jean is a comedian. So I guess he just was like, you know what would be fun, right? And he decked out one of the cards with a folding table, streamers, balloons, and sunflowers. Sunflowers being his wife's favorite, which is really sweet, actually. They even had musicians and catered dishes, which it's like organizing that is pretty wild. I really want to know like who are their vendors, and I wish that the New York Times had interviewed them because that would have been so cool. And what they did while on the subway train was they even tossed the bouquet. Because he's a comedian, part of me wonders if he wanted it to be a skit. Like, yeah, it's fun, but part of me wonders if like his comedian brain was kind of going off, right? Like, could this be a story? This could be a story, right? And actually, I think that's pretty genius because it's so out of the norm and so bizarre. Ms. Valdez, who is the new wife, she noted that 2 commuters who were not part of the guest list just decided to just take off work spontaneously and join in the fun, which is so wild and cool. And she was just saying that people were just really happy. There was another couple, Rosie Sullivan and Joe Levi, maybe Levy, shared a kiss on the New York subway train in their full attire and made part of the subway their wedding. They just rode it all the way to the end of the line. But I do want to mention that the New York City Metropolitan Transportation Agency does note that while it does not explicitly prohibit weddings, it does not like large gatherings that prohibit the flow of traffic, foot traffic. They are explicitly like, please do not interfere with the safe workings of the subway, which I think we can all get behind that at least. But hopefully people are going to be reasonable. When we think weddings, we definitely think people are going to be reasonable, right? This all seems to kind of be going into this trend of couples wanting something more authentic and more spontaneous. A lot of people, of course, there are always going to be type A people, kind of like I'm a little bit type A, who like a plan, but having that spontaneous element is something that a lot of people really like, and they're kind of starting to gravitate more and more to that. That is definitely something that I am seeing more and more, especially as Gen Z starts to age and really they're now the ones getting married for the most part. And of course there's still millennials getting married, especially those in like their late 20s and early 30s of the millennials. I mean, technically I guess you could say any age group is getting married right now, but there's just, there's trends. We're talking about trends right now. But I think one of the things that is really cool about the next generation is that they're less afraid to embrace some of these trends and just kind of go for it. I actually think that this one's kind of cool. I would love this. I don't know about you, but if I were a guest on the subway train, I would be like, oh yeah, I I'm joining. I'm gonna have a piece of cake if they let me. But this is actually, what is interesting is that this is actually not the first time anyone has gotten married on the subway. Back in March of 2012, a couple named Wei Wei Dong and Matthew Carey, they decided to have their wedding on the subway. And there's this really great photo of it. And they were just like, people are just hopping on and off, and we just decided to stay till the end of the line. Ultimately, their reason for wanting to do this was because they couldn't really afford to actually have one of the bigger venues, like the fancy kind of thing. And they decided, you know, let's just do a courthouse wedding. And they ended up having some beers with some friends and were like, you know what would actually be way more fun? And I kind of agree with them on that. As long as it doesn't disrupt the, you know, Metropolitan Transportation Agency thing. Keep it safe, folks. Keep it safe. So I read a little bit more. The end of the line would be Coney Island from the subway that they got on, and they actually got off and just had champagne on the edge of the boardwalk at Coney Island. And I think that's like actually really perfect. One of the quotes says, "We broke into song and dance right in the middle of the subway." And I think that that speaks to really the heart of the matter and where people's minds are at when they are actually doing it. This is bringing joy in the most absurd places. One of the couples decided to do this on the way to the reception. They were like, oh, the traffic can be unreliable, so why don't we just make all of our guests take the subway with us? This is a couple named Sergey and Marina. So it sounds like that particular couple had a friend who had a guitar and started to play. They erupted into song and dance in the middle of it. It just reminds me of a musical a bit. What they said was, even some unaffiliated passengers began to join in. They gave us the middle of the car, just like you give to the subway performers. About halfway into the journey between the boroughs, the train that they were staying in, it just started to break down. Apparently they were so involved with the celebration that they just did not hear the announcement happen. Another couple wrote that they just felt that the subway was so central to their lives that it just made sense for them. Mr. Levy, who I mentioned earlier, was actually quoted to say, "For better or for worse, we spend more time in the subway than we spend at any one location that we really love," he said. Which I don't know. That statement makes me feel a little sad knowing what I know about the subway. And I'm like, wait, but don't you spend time at home at all? Like, are you really on the subway that much? So that quote makes me feel kind of weird, but beyond that. But anyway, what was cool is that one of the brides did mention it's just like a night going out. If you show up in a wedding dress anywhere, what I've learned is that most people are going to be excited to share it with you. And I think that that is actually kind of cool. Where else do you think would be good, or maybe a little too weird to have a wedding? Tell me in the comments below. I want to hear it. And if you enjoy my content, consider following and just check out some of my other stuff here.